Yo guys, today we are gonna watch solo leveling cut content from Aninews. I have read the manhwa for solo leveling, but it has been 5 years, I think. It has been a long time since I read the manhwa, and I never read the web novel of solo leveling. And there's some interesting or facts about solo leveling or difference between the anime and manhwa. like like Sanjiwoo is what you call a very sociopath path person. Like the whole thing about the dungeon is all planned by Sanjin-woo. Like that's just messed up. But in the manhwa and anime, they make Sanjiwoo looks what you call nice in comparison to the web novel. So I really want to know what is the difference, because in the web novel he really likes to flex. So yeah, let's see how he flex in this episode where he finally get his S rank reveal, or what you call it. Yeah, let's just watch it.
Last episode, a lot of the cut content was mainly Sung's approach to battle. Here we have entire scenes ranging from a completely different outcome with Jinho and his father, all the way
Wait, let me make sure I'm recording. Yep, I'm recording.
to Detective Beck, the full conflict with
Detective
Lim
Beck.
and Sung, and just a whole lot more with all the other side characters. The anime clearly chooses to focus on each of the main conflicts, but what it leaves behind in exchange is the development of everything else. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing, but it does lead to episodes like these seeming a little rushed.
Yeah,
You can tell they're pushing forward purely with the intent of getting to the next conflict. So, where unlike in other episodes there'd only be minor details and scenes the anime could go without, in today's episode there'll be a lot more substance. So stick around for everything the anime left out from the novel and onward.
the manhwa is so good.
But first,
Reader
this
Studio
video
so
is
good.
sponsored by Surfshark.
Surfshark, wow. Yeah, I know when this. Sorry.
Figure out whether it's worth it for you. But anyway, episode 19, the 10th S-Rank Hunter, covering chapters 76 to 81 from the manhwa and chapters 92 to 100 from the web novel. This episode can be divided into multiple sections, each involving their own portions of cut content, so the first would have to be focused on Lee Min-sung. The anime
Yeah. Ada. Ada. Saya tengah buat benda.
just glosses over who he is and what he was planning, but the novel really goes deep into his character and impact on Sung's assessment day. So, to clarify just how popular Lee Min-sung was, he was often referred to as Asia's top superstar.
Oh,
An
Asia?
iconic actor known across the globe, making this a momentous occasion simply due to how popular he was. Like, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say cameras all over the world were focused on him today. It's why he was in a car with the country's top news reporter, and it's also why the media was so eager to find out more from him. They all wanted to know his plans for once he became a hunter. For Lee, this was all a calculated move on his part though, since everything from the press conference all the way to tomorrow's headline was meticulously planned with the intent of making him look good. Even the guild he signed with was chosen solely with that purpose in mind. How does joining the Reapers Guild make him look good? Well, with the Reapers now just a shell of its former self, him joining painted the image he was willing to stand up for the underdogs. I had mentioned this in a couple episodes before, but the Reapers Guild always seemed to be getting the short end of the stick lately. Before, they were once the top guild in the country, but after Chairman Go orchestrated Beck's departure into his own guild, the Reapers had lost the status it once held so proudly. That being the case, it was when Guildmaster Lim saw Beck and Choi fighting that he couldn't help but smile, since to him, he thought they
Is he a S rank? And I don't know. I don't think he. I believe he is in the Ragnarok one. In the solo level Ragnarok, but I don't really remember if it's his name or not. I need to check again. But I think we never get a scene with him in the main storyline that much. Like I don't know what his power is
They were fighting
compared
over
to
Lee.
other S
For
ranks.
once, it seemed like he wasn't losing out to them. Little did he know he was actually still 5 steps behind. That's its own separate conflict involving the guilds on a larger scale though, so to bring our focus back to Lee, he too couldn't help but smile thinking the guildmasters were fighting over him. It was enough to have him step out and begin preparations for the press conference. It was then that Sung would arrive himself, leading to a bit of confusion regarding all the commotion. What I mean is that Sung knew he could have avoided it just by using stealth or entering from the back. The reason he decided not to is because this was a date and time the association reserved in advance for him. He didn't feel like he should have to avoid the front just because all these reporters were here. He definitely didn't have to use the front door either, but it was just too easy to clear a path for himself. Shoving the reporters aside was no harder than moving a pillow. It was once Sung had gotten to the front that's when Lee's manager would step in to stop him. This confrontation didn't go down like how we saw in the anime though, because in the novel the manager was a lot more aggressive. As a muscular D-rank hunter himself, the manager believed this to be an opportunity to embarrass what he thought was a normal person. He would shove Sung with quite a bit of force, fully intending to knock him over and even injure him. This didn't sit too well with Sung though, since if he was just a normal person trying to make their way through, then the amount of force the manager used would have injured him for sure. He could tell from the moment the manager made contact with him. Of course, Sung didn't budge at all, so now the manager was in a pretty tough situation. Like, Sung was clearly pissed and emitting an aura that dictated not to mess with him, but at the same time the manager's boss was right behind him. This meant he could either concede, embarrass himself and potentially lose his job, or double down, hold the line and risk the consequences awaiting him.
Double down.
Neither were great considering Sung's gaze was scaring the life out of him right now.
Double down
That's
is never...
when Chairman Go would come out himself, not only saving the manager from international embarrassment, but also reminding Lee who it was that gave him permission to have this press conference in the first place. He wasn't upset that Lee started
The manager is lucky that he actually go out.
earlier than he should have, just annoyed that he was making trouble for Sung. This was quite the peculiar situation for the press, since the chairman rarely, if ever, greeted someone in person. Even for the employees who'd been working with him for years, not once had they ever seen Mr. Go personally receive a guest before. It didn't matter that they were powerful businessmen or high-up officials of government, the chairman would always be greeted by them, not the other way around. So, for him to be doing so now
very
for
highly
someone
respected.
so young, well, that was clearly something out of the ordinary. It made the press wonder who it was the chairman was meeting with, creating a noisy environment no longer suitable for a press conference. This obviously went to piss off Lee, since all his work was about to go up in smoke. Like, the cameras were being packed up and people leaving, so the only thing he could do to reverse it was make a statement. One that would give the press exactly what they were looking for. He knew if he shared what his future held with regards to his status as a hunter, then they were sure to stay, since that's why they were here to begin with. He just needed to start his assessment early, since to reveal his rank before that would implicate him as the manipulator he is. That's when Wu would step up to stop him, leading Lee to threaten him in a way that revealed quite a bit of information about him. As it turns out, Lee's dad was the vice chairman of Yushin Construction. The company we know is owned by Jinho's dad, and a company that also happens to be the association's #1 sponsor. That being the case, Lee was threatening to expose the association for treating him poorly, asking if Wu and the chairman would be able to handle the fallout. Wu would simply reply with yes, fully accepting Lee's bluff for what it was. He would then stare him down with an aura far more intense in the manhwa, leading Lee to have to come up with a different plan. It's here the story switches over to Sung's reassessment, so to focus on what was cut from that, we first have a bit of insight on what Chairman Go was thinking. He was feeling incredibly excited, since it was just recently that Wu had recounted what Sung had done for the Hunters Guild. It was a debriefing that confirmed everything he initially thought about Sung. The way he cleared the dungeon solo without asking for anything in return really went to highlight exactly the type of person Sung was. It showed he wasn't lying when he said he just wanted to hunt monsters here. So, If he truly didn't care about anything but fighting, then Chairman Go was ready to support Sung in every manner conceivable. It wasn't often an S-rank hunter's goal lined up perfectly with the purpose of the association. Of course, Mr. Go still wished he could bring Sung in, but he knew doing so would just be a waste. He was well aware Sung's powers were way too strong to keep outside the dungeon. Now, aside from the fact Choi and Beck were waiting here for an hour, Sung's
For an hour?
reassessment
That's
consisted
long.
of one shadow only. Well, in the manhwa he summoned everyone, but in the novel he kept it limited to his weakest soldier. He
really?
didn't want to overwhelm the examiner with the intense pressure some of his more powerful soldiers.
Oh, that's kind of unexpected. I expect that the novel would be Sun Jin-woo would be like to try to flex as much as possible, but it seems that he become more reserved in this moment, which is kind of weird.
That's when Sung would declare he could summon 100 more of them, leading the chairman to think it was 100 more of these soldiers only. With this being at most the equivalent of a B-rank hunter, that went to significantly reduce the full assessment of Sung's power here. Sure, it still made him more powerful than the entire combat force of many large guilds currently out there, but that was assuming every one of his summons was only as strong as this soldier. It didn't take into account anyone else. So, Sung's power was still quite the mystery, but what the examiner saw was enough to classify him as a mage-type hunter. The events after the assessment were pretty much the same, except when Beck had warned Sung not to leave, Sung assumed it was him implying that he would regret it. He thought they were referencing the massive offer he was leaving behind, not the sea of press waiting for him on the outside. It was a scene where his reaction in the manhwa was actually pretty funny. As for how the press ended up like this,
I really love the
that
manhwa
takes us to
more.
a scene from 10 minutes prior. While Sung was showcasing his abilities to the examiner, Lee was saving face making the announcement we saw in the anime. He dropped the bomb that he was retiring and made clear regardless of his rank, he would fully commit to being a hunter. This was to make it seem like he cared about his people and his country, but what it really was a lie to divert attention from those complaining he was avoiding his mandatory military service. As is required for every adult
what's his
male in
military
South Korea,
service? What the
Lee
hell?
was using his father's status to avoid what would normally be 2 years of conscription. So, where before the media was spotlighting something obviously terrible for his brand, this was the perfect way to reverse it. By retiring from acting and joining the Reapers Guild, not only did it make it seem like he was descending the summit just to protect the people, but it also came with a whole lot of money and the reputation of being the Reaper Guild's most famous hunter.
Really?
So, to Lee, this was a win-win-win for him. He was essentially achieving a lifetime guarantee against criticism. It was right at the climax of his reveal, though, that reporters' phones would start to ring one after the other. They were all receiving the news of the country's 10th S rank, all while slowly piecing together it was the mystery person they saw earlier. As for how everyone found out so quickly, it turns out the Hunter Association uses a dedicated app to deliver important information in real time. Usually, the app alerted users to the location of A-rank dungeons
I thought it got leaked or something.
or gates close to a dungeon break, but today the app was used to confirm Sung's status as an S-rank hunter. It was updated the moment Sung's new license was made. So, knowing Sung was on the inside, the press was now trying to rush the building, all while Lee was stuck figuring out why no one was paying attention to him anymore. He had even tried talking to the reporter who was previously creating headlines for him, but all eyes were focused on Sung now.
I feel bad
So
for
that
leaving
was the
Sung.
full extent of Lee's involvement here. It makes sense why the anime decided not to include everything about him, but if they did, it would have just served to add to the excitement. All he is a foil to contrast with Sung's character. A point that was still made clear with the abridged version we got in the anime.
A bitch version.
Now, the next major cut content comes in the form of Jinho's conversation with his father, because not only did the anime leave several important parts of it out, it also chose to adapt it differently.
Oh, really?
What I mean is that the outcome of this conversation wasn't the same as what we saw here. To start it from the very beginning though,
I
it
don't
was right
remember.
as they were about to start discussing Sung that Mr. Yu would receive the news about Sung himself. A phone call would leave him looking genuinely surprised, after which he would put on the news for Jinho to see. On it was a Sung looking very clearly annoyed. Though his face was visibly emotionless, Jinho had been around Sung long enough to know what his expressions really meant. What went to shock Jinho the most, though, was the news that Sung was an S rank. Remember, Jinho only knew Sung was great. He didn't know that Sung was S rank great. So, to see that this was what Sung's true power was, well, that was as much a shock to him as it was to everyone else. He was also incredibly proud that this was a person he got to fight alongside with. Now, I don't know why the anime decided not to include the real reason why Sung didn't join Jinho's guild, but it's more than just wanting to fight to become stronger. Some of you may consider this a spoiler, but if we're gonna fully understand Jinho's decision here as well as Sung's own decisions later, you definitely need to know the full context behind this. So, I'm sure this was pretty obvious, but the reason Sung declined is because he's planning to make his own guild. And the reason Jinho declined his father is because Sung had asked him to become Vice Guild Master. It's before Jinho would reveal his intent to accept that offer, though, that Mr. Yu would first show a rare expression of content. It was a change of face so unexpected that when it did happen, it usually spoke volumes.
Yeah, I kinda feel weird that there's some sort of conflict between Jinho with his father, because I remember that they have a very heartwarming conversation in this moment, but I guess the anime really changed a lot for some reason.
Here it was so strange that Jinho couldn't even look at it. Why the smile then? Well, despite Jinho not being able to secure Sung into their guild, what he achieved by befriending Sung was something his father hadn't been able to do himself yet. It was an action that fully aligned with the true intent behind the Yujin Guild's creation.
Yeah, now remember the reason for the guild is to find hunters that will help the family, protect his family, right? So the fact that Jiho find an S-rank that actually trusts him so much that to make him a vice president of the guild is very, what you call, good in a sense for his family. So yeah.
An important bit of context the anime never explained to us. So, why did Mr. Yu really want to create a guild? Well, it wasn't to make more money or to compete in the industry, but was instead to protect both himself and his family.
Yeah.
In a world where hunters were growing stronger by the day, to him it wasn't enough to rely on the rule of law or government anymore. I mean, with some hunters being as strong as an entire nation's military and others ruling like kings in certain smaller countries, it was only a matter of time before a new world order was formed.
Oh, new
At
world
least
order.
that's what it seemed like anyway. So, in order to get ahead of the curve before that happened, Jinho's father wanted to gather hunters he could trust. If he could put together a guild and fill it with hunters he could rely on, then that to him was the best way to protect those he cared about. For Jinho, such words were certainly heavy, but at the same time he couldn't help but feel happy about them. Reason being that this would be the first time his father was showing visible consideration and compassion. It was a side of him he'd honestly never seen before.
So it's technically the first time an Asian parents actually show compassion and love to your child.
One that actually looked out for the family. The smile was just the icing on the top, indicating approval towards Jinho already finding a hunter he could trust. By becoming close friends with Sung, Jinho had proved he was capable of finding hunters he could rely on. It was a test that finally made clear Jinho could run the Yujin Guild. So, with that being his to run the way he wanted, he would need to find more reliable hunters just like Sung, then turn them into people he could trust in the future. It was all because they would without a doubt become the most valuable assets he would end up
But if I'm not mistaken, Yojin still declined it, right?
having.
If I'm not mistaken.
It didn't matter how much money him or his father had, because the world was clearly leaning towards a new type of currency, one that was dictated by power. Now, this was certainly a happy moment for the both of them, but it wouldn't last long as Jinho had already decided to join another guild. Despite the Yujin Guild already having several S ranks in the final stages of negotiations, and despite it clearly being on the fast track to becoming the best and biggest guild in the entire country, Jinho was prepared to forego all of it for Sung. It was a decision his father was incredibly disappointed by.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, Jinho was still happy since this was the decision he wanted to make. He had no regrets making it whatsoever. Such a decision did come with significant consequences though, because unlike how the anime states Jinho left on his own accord, his father had actually kicked him out and cancelled all his bank accounts.
Oh.
It's not like he lived with his parents, but the apartment he did live in was owned by his father. So Mr. Yu took away Jinho's house as well as all the money he
Damn.
had access
What
to.
the hell? That's
This
kind of
leads to a
sad.
completely different reaction from Jinho here, because where in the anime he shows up at Sung's place all happy and determined, in the manhwa and novel he was
Oh.
actually crying. I know I'm skipping past a lot of cut content from in between these scenes, but I just want to make the whole Jinho storyline as coherent as possible. So Jinho would show up to Sung's asking for a place to stay, only to get the door shut in his face before he could even finish. Sung had zero intent of letting Jinho stay in the same house as his sister, instead forcing him to go and find a motel. This would be until he could find some office space for his own guild, but there was very little compassion from Sung in the manhwa and novel. None of this brotherly love like how we saw in the anime.
I like
In
the
fact,
anime version.
Sung wouldn't even tell Jinna who it was when she asked. He instead opted to call Jinho a stranger he'd never met before.
So
He
mean.
insisted he was just some random person showing up at the wrong address.
So mean.
So, I couldn't tell you why myself, but for some reason Sung really wanted to hide his association to him. It's for that reason why I think the anime presents this scene a little bit better, since
Yeah.
shutting out Jinho doesn't really seem like something Sung would do here.
Yeah.
I mean, the man literally just gave up a multi-billion-dollar business opportunity. The least Sung could do in return is provide him a place to stay, especially after all that talk about being brothers at the restaurant here. Now, when the story goes back to Jinho's father later,
I really love the relationship between Sun Jin-woo and Jinho in this in the anime, because it does have that brotherly love. Well, in the manhwa, it doesn't really have that much. Even so, there's a lot of fine expression from Sun Jin-woo when he is with Jinho. But yeah, I still like what they changed for this.
despite his wife suggesting he was being a bit too harsh, Mr. Yu fully agreed every choice had responsibilities and consequences. That being the case, this was just the result of Jinho's choice. As frustrated as Mr. Yu seemed though, his wife wasn't so sure he was actually angry. Reason being that, despite all the talk, his expression still looked as if he was pleased in some way. Yes, he was upset since Jinho rebelled against him, but at the same time he wasn't unhappy. No, he couldn't help but be a little content with the way Jinho showed conviction towards something he was passionate about. So, really, Mr. Yu was only upset at Jinho saying no to him because the lifestyle he built was no different than the one he had in his business. To him, orders were meant to be followed, and for anyone to say no to them, well, that was unacceptable. That being the case, his reaction to Jinho was essentially the equivalent of him firing an employee. It was just the natural way to respond for him. The reaction of someone who treated his family the same way he treated a business. It was then that the first symptoms of the eternal slumber would take effect, but rather than talk about that now, I'm gonna save that, the rest of the press conference, Beck's sleuthing, the auction house, and the dungeon for another video.
Oh.
If I continued talking about the cut content from all that, then this video would be 40 minutes and I wouldn't be finished until Saturday. So expect a part 2 to this episode likely on Friday or Saturday.
Okay,
I
will
do hope
wait.
you enjoyed this one though, as there was certainly quite a lot to talk about. It might not be focused on Sung, but these scenes definitely serve to develop the world around him. So let me know what you thought down in the
Yeah, that's all from me. It's kinda what did we learn? I don't remember it all. A lot of things that I learned is something that I already know, and only I just learn a bit of context from the novel. That's all, and yeah, it's a interesting a video. It kinda what you call regenerate my memory of reading the solo leveling manhwa. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you for watching. If you guys enjoy it, please leave a like and subscribe, and please leave a like on Aniews video. I will leave I will leave a link in the description below. And yeah, see you guys next time. Peace out.